Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Los Angeles, California, United States of America, April 22nd, 2021. I've been giving a series of talks. This is the 22nd talk in this series based upon my newly released book, which I'm quite happy about, called Extinction X-Rated, a formidable read if you have the environmental courage, the existential courage to dive into it and see it as a way to reveal the inner symbols of good and evil in our own mind in this world. So from my heart to yours, thank you for being a part of this sharing this morning. Today's talk, a little bit under the weather. I didn't, not that I didn't sleep well, but I didn't sleep much. Had to, had to call upon my monk mode, in breath, out breath, for most of the night, just to be embodied and feel. So thank you for being a part of this little bit of a slow presentation. Environmental awareness, Earth Day. Earth Day and eco-grief. Those of us who feel the empathetic fibers of our heart and having to encounter to our ability the collective unconsciousness of consciousness and humanity is a burden, a cruelty that's very difficult, I don't know about you, for me to bear. I dare say our hearts break with feeling and seeing and interrelating with that collective unconsciousness and cruelty that often comes from unconsciousness to self, to family, to community, to nation, and obviously to the planet. Eco-grief, Dhamma joy. It's always there if you have a relationship to the Dhamma. Those of you who are the savants of Dharma and true yogis, I would call them people who are deeply immersed in the experiential awakening of beautiful qualities of heart and mind and dealing with courageous engagement with crises and context. And then the courage to dream, regardless, right? Regardless of the modality, the narrative. Yes, there are those forces that want to crush the creative, the artistic, the surreal, the existential, the dreamer in all of us. But, refuse to give up, right? Keep empowering the tenacity of courage. Make it contagious in our families. Make it a beautiful nutrient that we share through behavior and speech and thought to give rise to that very, very tender, beautiful essence that's innate in life, the biblical, the numismatic, the Holy Spirit, that which is everything. And how well do we occupy the holy, the Dhamma joy, the eco-grief, and the sixth mass extinction that we are currently in. Lots to hold. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of my life. Hope you'll stay tuned and relaxed. I'm both the poet and the pragmatist, a little bit of poetry, a little bit of pragmatism, and this improvisational, extemporaneous dive into these issues, I was recently in Bali before coming here to Los Angeles, and just at the onset of this pandemic, I don't know about you where you live, but I am in Los Angeles. It's unthinkably artificial driven by the electrification of everything, right? The whole globe is glowing with electrification. Fossil fuels and coal and nuclear power, just this deep, ongoing pulse, the heartbeat of energy that keeps this big consumerist urban global metropolis called planet Earth, undulating in its capitalism, communism, totalitarianism. And then there we sit as Dharma consumerists, everything connected to technology and the meter and time and how much. And we pay our bills and pay our rents and mortgages and contribute to the ongoing onslaught of nature and life. And what they say, the root cause of this mass extinction that we're in here on Earth Day, to honor the truth of Earth, our lives, and our role in Earth Day, and the seemingly irretrievable descent into catastrophic environmental collapse. Difficult topics. But our participation in electrification, fossil fuels, I'm not trying to shame me or you. Who would ever imagine walking through the tundra somewhere in India millennia ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago, you and your wife and husband and children, you saw some fire coming out of the earth and you put your hand in it and it burned you, that's just methane, natural fossil fuels. And it's like, who would ever know that would be the source of our death? Airplanes and nuclear missiles and all that comes from all these mega cities and little villages and phones and smartphones and dumb phones and swipes and likes and doom scrolling that we all do here today, just so far into the future from that day on the tundra somewhere in India or Africa or America, South America. And someone says, hey, it's hot, let's just use it. Let's capture it. Let's just carve out something and take those peppermint leaves and put it in water and let's make tea. You heat it through that methane. Or you char and barbecue and cook that antelope leg that you've killed and you've been told to kill as sustenance rather than eating it with raw and oozing with maggots. It just makes sense that methane and fossil fuels, which is just the nature of nature, right? It's just us and trees and rocks, all of it just re-amalgamating in this weirdness. Jump time to today, right? Nearly 8 billion of us on a fast track on technological fixes and new green deals and the inherent lies in all of these technologies to so-called fix the conundrum of greed and delusion that propels the electrification, that propels us to continue to commit genocide on non-humans and on nature. Eco-grief, those of you who do feel, and if you do have the courage to acquire my book, Extinction X-Rated, it really is both the mass extinction and extinction in terms of the Pali Buddhist word, nibbana. And what can we do? It was my attempt to just intervene in the collective to see if there's any possibility to stop the locomotive, the spaceship of ignorance, to consume and to continue to live in the fantasy, the mystical phantasms of delusion that project, ideas of solutions that are no more than furthering the death march of life. And so here we are today on April 22nd, 2021, Earth Day. I keep thinking of, the satirical, infamous honoring how the Sarajevians celebrated the response of the free world in the United Nations during their 43 months of unremitting terror and assassinations and bombings by the Bosnian Serb troops that surrounded this incredible enclave of elegance and intellectualism and intimacy and theater and dance, right in the footsteps of the earth, not just Europe. Televised assassinations, just insanity, and they erected a large canned beef with a UN sticker on it. And that was what the world sent into these beloved human beings during the darkest days of their lives, to feed them with these outdated cans of dead beef. And isn't that sort of the symbol of the Washington, D.C. Congress? Isn't that a dead beef can? It's so obvious that these urban euphemisms for planetary denigration will cut emissions by half by 2030. Meanwhile, there's no humans in nature left alive. It's just the human dilemma, the conundrum, the deep existential conundrum of truthful thought, speech, and action that is so far-reaching, right? Who among us has the capacity to cast our wisdom and compassion simultaneously generations in front of us and look historically to generations behind and glean with artificial, organic intelligence the wisdom of both directions and integrate that wisdom into thought, speech, and action, immediately transforming anything denigrating, right? Isn't that sort of what Dhamma joy is about? Dhamma intelligence, spiritual intelligence, trying to get the operating system of coexistence, peaceful sustainability deep into our DNA and to tease out from the genome even one letter of violence and denigration and stupidity. Is it possible in this great samsara? The courage to dream isn't just about dreaming about art and sex and love. It's really, can we imagine, can you imagine with me today the capacity of the human mind or transhuman mind, the mind of the mind, the collective mind, and the mind beyond the collective, that there is an impulsion, there's an intelligence that we can tap into, you can tap into, the collective can tap into, and dance and integrate and bring the Dhamma, the fidelity of wisdom into that connection and live and tease out of this great infinity hell. I don't know about you, but my heart is so broken with feeling the incredible unconsciousness of fellow women and men. Of course, our own included, but Jesus Christ. I think we're among the rare people. I don't know about you, how you feel about yourself. We're really, really rare, and it's becoming even more evident to me how rare, unbelievably rare we are, and how important it is to just see so rad, so out of the box, so out of the conformity, so in protest to any form of manipulation to break the chains of our slavery, right? Every form of metaphor possible to release the deepest places in our soul, right? Come on, man, let's get evangelical about living. Maybe not on this earth. I don't know about you. It's so cruel here. It's so fucking cruel. I can't even imagine the day in the life of a girl chained and sex slaved. I can't even think of it. Of a torture victim in Burma right now, in the gulags, trying to wipe their soul of their desire for freedom and democracy. Wow, go to hell, as U Win Tin said after 19 years in solitary. Go to hell. That kind of fight, yes, 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 yes. Well, when I was in Bali, there's something so beautiful about Bali. I went there in 83 or 4. lived off and on for 4 years, went back a few years back. But this time when I was there in March, April through August, it was pandemic time and the whole island was adjusting to what to do, when to do it, how to do it, masks, no masks. And obviously very few tourists, if any. The airports were closed. And I had this large area of 30 or 40 bungalows where I stayed, and all the people had gone, the staff was laid off, and just kept 2 or 3 people on this 5-acre piece of extraordinarily beautiful nature near the center of Ubud, where I've always desired living. And more to the point is, it became so quiet. It was like my return to the earth. In a way, I've been very existential, very cerebral, traveling for years. But this was like a conscious, okay, stop. I think that's the real takeaway for me today on Earth Day and Earth Life. And it's okay, hey, chill. God and Earth and life is calling us to, hey man, chill. Take your shoes off. Take your pretense down. Take your tomorrow off the curtain of hope. Give it all over. Give it all over, right? So easy to say these things, but to feel it. Let go of the world, let go of the war. Feel. And I did that in Bali. I was assisted by various molecules. I won't repeat it out loud. And at times I played and danced in that whole frolic of feeling. And just, wow. I never really looked at flowers so intimately. I never looked at snakes. I never looked at rats. I never listened to the sound of all those kites, of the boys and their fathers flying them day and night. And the coo of the pigeons. Just love their sound. And the orchids. And then deeper, I remember a couple of days in a row where I was really very immersed in feeling. And of course, those of you who know Bali, when the clouds aren't there, the skies are like right in your heart. The stars are all through your mind and body. You've got wonderment for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you throw in the chocolate-coated molecule, and you yogify the space with your tender heart, and you meditate, and you drink something that's absolutely divine to every molecule in your mind and body, and you now are in resonant fidelity. I remember walking that day throughout the acres of the villas, and it was really kind of an eye-opener for me, not brand new, but a resurrection of insight about Earth. Because I'd lived as a monk for some time, not a long time, just a few years. But in Sri Lanka, I lived for about a year on a remote island, 5-acre island, where I was really, really immersed in virginal jungle. And this last time in Bali was the last time I was so connected to this experience. And animal life, it's like non-human life. Like, okay, it's great to have cats, but they're all generally wild over there. And if you don't feed them, they feed themselves on life. And you, don't take that pigeon. And it's like, oh my God. And I had an incredibly beautiful frog that lived in my room above one of the paintings. It always came back. Every morning and slept there. And I don't know whether it was this one or not, but through the grass I saw this oh my God, it's a snake, and he crawls around, and there he is. He's and he's got a frog in his mouth. And I remember seeing this beautiful psychedelicized beetle about 2 inches long that was trying to escape these red ants. And it was such a dilemma to look at this thing through the filter of the molecules and to see these red ants just trying to capture and take the life of this beetle. And it's like the dilemma of intervention, and then where would I put this beetle? And this is nature, right? Earth Day. And the quieter we get, I think the meditation of slowing down and solitude and intimacy and the willingness to really look and feel of context, I think nature and life will teach us everything that we need to know if we're willing to just abide. But is there hope? That's another story I'll get to. And I remember at the end of that day, I was in such despair, existential despair, eco-despair. For the last 5, 6, 7 years, I've been looking quite carefully at climate collapse, societal collapse, and all the things that come with that, which are hard to get out. Mass starvation, disruption of supplies, collapse of food chains, the interruption of electrification, warmth, heat. I mean, those are radical considerations that those of you who do study and have a fairly good connection to looking deeper than the spins in the mainstream media, those are all the realities, very much like looking at nature that day for me. That's a very intense reality to see these little things like snakes and birds and my beautiful cats and the beetles and the ants and the frogs and the chickens that are slaughtered and the pigs that we eat and the beef and the fish. And I was actually listening to a podcast sometime back with Professor Paul Ehrlich, the professor of biology at Stanford University. And among many amazing things he was talking about, very learned man, to state the obvious, he was talking about just the microplastics that are in all of these artificial yoga wear and everything pretty much that we buy that isn't even, deep Egyptian organic cotton, and how it's not only just in the oceans, in the fish, but it's also in the air. We're breathing it, our bodies. It's like everywhere. But jumping around, he made the comment in relationship to the certainty of this great mass extinction that we're in, the 6th, with 5 previous and probably many more after this one, that he said from a human point of view, we're in a slow motion extinction. No matter what you feel and how you perceive it, no matter what deep urgency you bring to it, yes, there's equal degrees of grief, but it's a slow motion event. There's still lots of joys and comforts and eating the strawberry and making love and writing our books and hoping for a better future and tending to the children and doing what we can to save the world. But he said from a scientific point of view, an environmental point of view, a biological point of view, it's instantaneous with cosmic time. And to let that in to the narrative, it's instantaneous. I've said it so many times, it's worth saying many times, but the great environmentalist David Suzuki out of Canada, sang a very dire hymn in relationship to Earth Day and the certainty of extinction as being human beings in a car driving headlong into a brick wall. And he made the comment of how we in the car are arguing over where to sit, and I expand that to what's on the radio, what music we listen to, what breath we watch, in breath, out breath, our chanting, our projection of where we're going, how we can avoid the brick wall, yelling at the drivers, all of us, to put on the brakes, take our shoes off, take our urban skulls off, go back to the Balification of the planet, look at nature, look at non-human life, understand it, give up the shell, the lies of power and of technology and digital illusory fixes that only compound the problem. Instantaneous planetary annihilation. What a concept that is. Eco-grief. I don't know about you, but this was my attempt at eco-grief, Dhamma joy, and the courage to dream. Because when you unpack these things to any extent, there is no future as we know it. It may be a future that's more likened to a dystopian landscape, perhaps even as radical as being forced into cannibalism, not too far out. I can't even imagine. I've listened to pundits talk about if the electricity grid went down, or there were a breach in security or a type of digital terrorism that is not only on the plate, but it is happening now. If the electricity grid went down in North America, which they say is a high likelihood in the next 10 years, within 1 year without electricity, 90% of all inhabitants would die. And it wouldn't just be like out breath and you die with your mindfulness of the breath. It'd be a long time without food and warmth. Look at the chaos that we have in urban settings and villages, with order, with police force, with governments, with so-called rule of law, with so-called democracy. Look. It's obviously so flawed, it's unthinkable. But look at the crime, look at the drug use, the domestic violence, the urban violence, the mass shootings, the national violence. We're just so unaware of how our tax dollars just go to the persecution of third and fourth world nations, to dominate, to kill, to annihilate, to steal their resources, and to imprison their human life, and to create manufacturing animals, turning human beings into livestock for our comforts. I mean, it's a terrible picture, but it's there, it's real. Earth Day is about, trying to avoid putting a dead beef, outdated can of Campbell's soup into the beloved city of Sarajevo during 43 months of Holocaust and calling that compassionate action. What about all of us here? What would compassionate action look like today on Earth Day? To completely interrupt, is it possible to completely maybe 50% interrupt our lives so that we are not complicit with the Fourth Reich of environmental annihilation? The great Fourth Reich of industrialized consumerism called me and my collusion with mass murder of humans and of non-humans? It's a conundrum beyond anything that I think existential conundrums could present. And there is the Dhamma joy, right? The Dhamma joy and the courage to dream. I remember reading a book way back. It's called The Power of 10. I'd recommend you can get it online. It's a picture book, and it's in short. It's got 40 pictures in it, and the first picture, I'll tell this in a very, it's a big black and white with lots of little white specks on it, and there's a little caption that reads with an arrow in the middle, this is the cosmos. Each star represents infinite galaxies, and in the middle there, on that infinite galaxy, there is a solar system, there's a planet called Earth, and in Chicago, there's a park, and there's a couple having a picnic there happily. And that's a little arrow. That's page 1. And then page 2 is actually a close-up of that couple. And you go, wow. An infinite cosmos of infinite galaxies and infinite solar systems and infinite dimensions. That's Earth Day in context. The beetle being eaten by the red ants. The snake having its meal with my beloved tree frog that abided above my picture in my room. My beautiful cats wandering through the grass and the fields and eating the magnificent pigeons. And we humans here dancing for a small amount of time, 1,000, 2,000, 100,000 years on the surface of this splendid blue-green sphere, driven by technological madness that's so appropriate just to annihilate life, both human and non-human and environmental. And at one point, the whole thing disappears. So page 3 of this book pulls back, The Power of 10 it's called, and you see the identical picture that was on page 1, but it says, this is the power of 10 closer to the couple in the park in Chicago having a picnic, and there's that arrow. And each one of those stars represent infinite galaxies and infinite solar systems. I mean, I don't know how large is here when we talk about space and time and dimensionality, but I think when the courage to wonder, grounded in the fidelity of a Dhamma joy that's embodied with our shoes off, for me, Bali-like, hearing the kites, crying, experimenting with the molecules and feeling and being and decathexing and stop eating animals, which I did. And really, I remember looking at my hands a lot, feeling so gifted that I had them. And then at night, talking to these infinite galaxies that we now are embedded in right now. It's not like something in a book, is it? Maybe that's what we should do today to celebrate Earth Day, is to wonder, courageously wonder and embody Dhamma joy, and not be afraid of the grief and the tears of understanding that it looks like we're in the death march of planet Earth, which is nature and natural. Extinctions are natural, not to shame ourselves for what was natural. After all, fossil fuels are nature. It's us, life. But to wonder, I would yell out, we're not alone. I'm not alone. I want to know you. The great astrophysicists and quantum physicists tell us that in our foreseeable universe, there's many billions of Earth-like planets in orbits around star-like suns at distances where there could be life. I want to meet you. And then the simultaneity of at least 10 different dimensions. Buddhist cosmology talks of 31, not to mention within each of those many, many degrees of radiance, right? And valiance. There's wonderment for me. It's not the courage to wonder. It's like, okay, I'm not alone. That gives me a lot of hope, a lot of joy. And the book goes on to 40 images, and eventually we come to somewhere down in the 30s where you see our solar system. You know how as kids, there's Saturn, the infamous rings, and you feel like, and it has a little arrow in the middle there with a little dot, and it says Earth. The caption reads, on Earth, in Chicago, in a park, there's a couple having a picnic, having a blast. And you're just passing Saturn. And you're feeling like, whoa, man, I'm coming home. I'm almost like back at my flat. And you think of today, a pandemic on that little Earth down there and that little pointing with historical genocides and the massacre of indigenous peoples and the attempt of the white people or the conquerors, not just the white, but the conquerors on reconciliation and all the machinations of our psychologies and philosophies and our struggles and our books. Look, feel, in an instant, as Paul Ehrlich said, from a astrophysical point of view, from a deep environmental point of view, from a cosmological point of view, extinction is instantaneous. And we finally get up close to about 100 meters above the park in Chicago. It's like page 39. And there is that couple on a blanket in the park having wine and a picnic. And you go, oh wow, the ideal moment, right? Dhamma joy. They're probably yogis, they've been to Bali, they've meditated in Burma, they've written books. They're living the high Dhamma life. They're bringing mindful Tantra energy to each moment of love and intimacy. It's the ideal moment, okay? Let's make it that way. Meanwhile, they're on Earth, and there's all of us crying simultaneously with the eco-grief, and Paul Ehrlich's coming. Don't forget that extinction is instantaneous. And Dr. David Suzuki says, even you, couple in the park in Chicago or in the car, heading headlong into the brick wall of an extinction, and you too are blissed out in the back seat making love, thinking that you are devoid of the possibility, not just of mortality, of planetary extinction. Okay. The last page, which is really interesting, is it says, this is the power of 10 past the couple in the park having a picnic in Chicago through an electron microscope. And the last page is identical to the first page, except that these are the smallest particles that are known and are able to be photographed. And it points in the middle. This is the couple in the park in Chicago having a picnic, to the 10th power reduced. And where did that couple go, right? Who are we, right? I mean, that to me is the wonderment, the courage of wonderment. You know, yes, old age, disease, and death, and uncertainty, and horror, and tears, and all the various things of my beloved frog, and the iridescent beetle by the red ants, and this carnivore culture you can't escape by birth. There still is wonderment, right? And I want to encourage you to encourage me. I don't want to encourage you. Encourage me not to lose the mystical possibility of a miracle. Stay attuned to that. Don't just wish it, My Dhamma today is in the actualization of the miracle, the poet and the pragmatist. Yes, look at data, look at life, be smart, feed yourself well, avoid stress, too much stress. But you know, us as empaths, us as feelers, as yogis, the collective unconscious is unbearable. How do you tune that out when it's just careening through the oxygen in your blood? You live your whole life developing empathy and compassion. Let's just turn it off. Thinking that compassion, because you don't watch the news or read an article, is somehow cutting off compassion or empathy in people's faces any more than infinity denies you and me. So I'd like to end with Dhamma joy. I feel very blessed, I don't know about you, to have an increasing intensity of memory, which is the meaning of sati, spiritual memory of who you are, why you are, and what's important to who you are and why you are. The memory intelligence, like learning the alphabet, putting syllables together in words, like learning the lyrics of a song, sati, the conscious memory of that which is valuable to transform the mind and the soul into the highest order radiance of truth and freedom. That song, that hymn, the Dhamma hymn, and the joy that comes from knowing that you're memorizing in your DNA, in your existential cell body, in all the chromosomes in God that we have embedded in us, that's nature. I want to know the truth of freedom. I want to know the miracle of the mystical. I want to abide in the ever-evolving, deepening, radiant luminosity of the Holy Spirit. I want to know my own Allah, my own Jesus, my own Buddha, my Mary Magdalene, my Rumi, my poet, my Alan, my Janine, my Bella, my Catherine, my lover, my hope, my dream. Wherever you go today in your Wish on Earth Day, may I encourage you to cry and cry with the elegance of eco-grief, to bring back in the courage to decathex from behaviors as much as possible, habit patterns of blind obedience to denigration of self, family, culture, nation, and the future of life. Today, that courage to have a vision of the couple in the park in Chicago having a picnic is about the future of life, the unborn. Life is the divine feminine infinite womb, isn't it? Life comes out of infinity, not just the woman embodied in form or the female in animal. Life is a womb. And to me, the womb is innately mystical. I do feel that in my time in Bali, and my months here, because I've chosen to be not alone, but I've chosen to be in the sanctity of a mystical retreat, and I've taken my shoes off. And I sit outside. I watch the hummingbirds. I almost feel they know me. Sometimes they come so close as I am to this camera, and there they just stationarily fly. They never intrude, but they come closer and closer month after month. I see the squirrels. They're less and less afraid when they see me. Sometimes they make eye contact as if they're the Buddha. It reminds me of Bali. It reminds me of my childhood. I lived in Maine when I was young. Forests, snow. Let us remember who we are and to take advantage of these rare moments while there is moments. To feel and embody the Dhamma intelligence. That's it. I'm going to close here. I just so appreciate that I have tuned into over the last decade, especially the last 5 years more and more the last 3 years, more and more the last 6 months, and more this last 10 days, immediacy. It's not urgency, it's just high fidelity, multidimensionality with heart and vulnerability to keep alive not the wonderment of the miracle, but what is the intelligence of the miracle. I want to participate poetically and pragmatically in the Bodhisattva miracle of removing from my heart fear, greed, and anger, the fear of illness, the fear of death, the fear of loss, the fear of separation, the fear of being associated with fools and idiots, the fear of annihilation, the fear of extinction, the fear of disillusionment, the fear of inability. I want to know the radiance of the mystical in its fullest splendor. Because until we're all safe, none of us are safe. Until we're all free, none of us are free. These are cliches, no. I am now in the hands of others, and I have to show up to be in those hands on my terms as well. But my life forward, as your life is forward, is in the hands of others as much as it is yourself. We're all in that park in Chicago, in our respective cities, in our homes, in our villages. May I invite you today on Earth Day to have a mystical picnic. Cry with your ego grief. Bring your Dhamma joy. And may you scream and cry and sing with your courage to truly dream for the unborn. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in today. And I hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you.